We're going to go into the first part of our show called First and 10. This is SEC football talk, of course, your Crimson Tide, my Tiger talk. You know, we're going to go through some things here on First and 10. First, Alabama football has the first camp scrimmage. The race heats up as redshirt junior Ty Simpson has officially won the job. And freshman Austin Mack is close behind Kalen Russell, the talented freshman, not out of the mix. As fast as advertised, says Coach DeBoer, on his freshman quarterback, Kalen Russell. So, Alex, question, I guess first off, how does DeBoer get the two backups involved, if any? And if Ty plays well, will it hurt the development to not use those guys whatsoever?
If you're going to play the young guys like Austin Mack and Kalen Russell, it's going to be starting out putting them in non-pressure situations. You have Louisiana Monroe on the 6th of September. I would expect Kalen and Austin Mack to get playing time there unless there's some disaster that Alabama has been known to do in those type of games. I mean, a couple years ago with USF, with Ty Simpson,
I remember
that was a whole headache. So I expect them to get playing time there. You also think later in the season, Eastern Illinois, the tune-up game before Auburn, they're going to get playing time there regardless. But the big test for Ty is going to be the 27th against Georgia in September. I think that's going to be a telltale sign of whether Ty Simpson's the quarterback for the rest of the season for the Crimson Tide. Is if he plays like we saw Jalen Milroe play in the second half where it was awful, or is it like Jalen Milroe in that first quarter against Georgia where he was just destroying that defense for the Bulldogs?
Yeah, and you touch on Jalen Milroe. We actually have quite several points of him on the show. I personally, as an Auburn fan, really respected his talent. Obviously, not someone I wanted my team to have to try to tackle, but Jalen Milroe, definitely a talented quarterback, of course, now with the Seattle Seahawks, doing some good things there. More on that later. But you talked about Jalen Milroe, and I think it's important to at least bring up the tendency of that last year's team, because this is a Ty Simpson who claims he's a dual threat, and he does have some mobility. Not to Jalen Milroe's level by any means, but Jalen Milroe was the leading rusher for the Tide last year in a lot of instances, and got the call almost every time you needed a big run. So it's going to be interesting for me to see how Ty Simpson kind of handles the pressure when it's 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, nobody's open. Does he have the ability to make a few people miss and get the sideline? And I think really that will be one of Alabama's only question marks going into the year, as far as I'm concerned as an Auburn fan.
The difference between Ty Simpson and Jalen Milroe is you talked about Jalen Milroe, his athleticism, his ability to run outside the pocket, get that first down when it's 3rd and 10 and the pocket breaks down. Ty Simpson, he's a dual threat quarterback. What he is listed as, what he was recruited as, the number 2 dual threat quarterback in the 2022 recruiting class. But he's not Jalen Milroe. There will never be another Jalen Milroe. Milroe is probably one of the top 5 most elusive, quickest runners at the quarterback position of all time. Michael Vick, Lamar Jackson are up there with him. Yeah. But Milroe is not Ty Simpson, and Ty Simpson's not Milroe. Milroe, while he was great at times, 4th and 31, I'll always appreciate what he did for the program in that play.
Man, yeah.
But there was also plays where Jalen Milroe wanted me to go bald, because last year you can just go back to the start of the Vanderbilt game, starts out with 2 turnovers, never able to recover. And while the game wasn't entirely his fault because the defense couldn't stop the option that Vanderbilt was running, Jalen Milroe starting off with 2 straight turnovers did us no help. You look at the Michigan game in the bowl game, starts out with 3 turnovers.
Yeah.
That was the downfall of the Tide in that game. Ty Simpson we'll see if he's able to control the ball. Brian Grubb and Kalen DeBoer have talked about they want the 3 C's of their quarterback, or what I would say would be the 3 C's, because they've mentioned it so much in their press conferences: consistency, command, and care. Consistency, they want to have consistency when it comes to passing and running the offense. They want to have the quarterback have command of that offense, and they also want the quarterback to take care of the ball. Jalen Milroe, 11 interceptions last year, talked about that and how they came so poorly. That's not even mentioning the fumbles he's lost in his career as well. Ty Simpson has proven to them in practice he can do those 3 C's, and that's what I think won him that job, is having the care, consistency, and command of the offense.
Yeah, and I think you got to give the kid his flowers for kind of waiting his turn, if you will. I mean, he backed up Jalen Milroe, but really could have been used several more times before they officially started him this season. And another note from that scrimmage for the Tide was Jam Miller. Coach DeBoer said he thought Jam started out really well in the scrimmage. The offensive line did look good. Jam got to the second level and broke a couple of tackles, and he thought that it was one of the better showings that he's seen Jam Miller have in a scrimmage. Those were Kalen DeBoer's words. Alex, Tide fans, and really Tigers fans, both with a rich history of good running game. They kind of have gotten spoiled in the last 2010 plus with all of the all-pro running backs that have trotted through Tuscaloosa. Jam Miller last year was a guy that you really never knew what he was going to do. I mean, some of his runs were very, very limited, but granted, I don't necessarily think that was all his fault. There's no two more important positions on the football team than a left and right tackle, because that's how the edge gets set.
Yeah.
Does your left end win on defense, or does their left tackle win on offense, and vice versa with the right side? And I thought when Jam did get some good blocks last year with a watered down, if you will, offensive line compared to what we could see this year, I think Jam Miller could be in for a good year. Don't know if it's breakout worthy like some of the other things that we've seen, but what do you think about Jam Miller in this season? I think he's going to have a good year.
When I started watching Alabama football, I was blessed to have started off with Mark Ingram, who won the Heisman, and it's been great running backs ever since. Trent Richardson, Eddie Lacy, Najee Harris, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, T.J. Yeldon, Kenyon Drake. There's tons of guys I'm forgetting. Jam Miller, he hasn't been given a true chance in this program. I don't think he has. You talk about the inconsistency with the play calling and lack of commitment to the run game outside of Jalen Milroe running around in circles and getting yardage. That's what it's been the past couple of years under Milroe and the two offensive coordinators he's had is, well, we have Milroe at quarterback. We're going to use his legs because he's the fastest player on the field at times, and I understand that. But you also ignored guys like Jam Miller and Justice Haynes, who is now at Michigan.
Yep.
But at all spring practices, Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer, like you talked about, KJ, have been talking about how good Jam Miller has been. And when Ryan Grubb was asked how the running game was looking, he just responded with Jam Miller. He didn't say anything else. He just said Jam Miller. That tells me a lot about how much trust they have in him as a running back. I don't expect Jam Miller to be Derrick Henry or win the Heisman for this team this season.
I agree.
But I expect Jam Miller to be a focal point of the offense and be able to help Ty Simpson in his first year starting at the quarterback position.
And you have to really know who Kalen DeBoer is as a coach and how he has used his running backs. One guy in particular that will not start over Jam Miller that a lot of good things are being said about is Daniel Hill, who Coach DeBoer used the words very comfortable with, catching the ball out of the backfield. It is a huge part of his system, being able to throw the ball short to a running back, let him get the yardage, uses power. That type of runner. And another guy that hasn't really shown anything yet, hasn't been given an opportunity. Daniel Hill, I think, as I've seen, the tapes and, of course, high school to college, you don't know how that's going to translate. But I think he has all of the makings to give Alabama a decent 1-2 punch in the backfield and kind of have a by-committee approach.
You'll have guys like Daniel Hill in the backfield who you talked about how Kalen DeBoer loves, but you can't ignore Kevin Riley, who's lightning fast. A.K. Deers the same way. They'll be the Lightnings in their backfield, and you'll have the Thunders like Daniel Hill and Richard Young, and then transfer Dre Washington. It's a good combination in that backfield and a good problem to have where you have so much talent back there where you can go from Jam Miller and to Daniel Hill or Richard Young, and while there's going to be a little bit of a drop-off, it's not going to be something major where we're worrying about what the running back position looks like if, God forbid, Jam Miller hurts himself in the season.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And even in my lifetime, the few times that I've seen Auburn put together a good football team, we've been 2, 3, sometimes 4 deep at running back. Just such an important position, especially in the SEC West when you have just defensive linemen coming at you left and right. Yeah, another thing that Coach DeBoer did mention in practice was the slow defensive starts. You talked about it earlier, how much, Vanderbilt, which shout out Diego Pavia. I mean, he busted our tail too.
Don't give him a shout out.
I have to. I mean, I'm the type, if you beat me once, I don't like you, but if you beat me twice, I have no choice but to respect you. And Diego Pavia, his road was really, really different, but just a dynamic player. But that Vanderbilt game, just one game as an example of which Alabama just ended up being in the game, but a slow start in particular on defense. Coach DeBoer was very, very clear that Jam Miller did have a good game, but he also said that meant there were some seams with some linebackers and DBs maybe being out of position. And that's something that Alabama has also reloaded in. And linebacker is another thing, as I've watched Alabama linebackers in my lifetime, Dante Hightower, Rolando McClain, just to name a few. I know you would probably be able to name about 5 or 6
C.J. Mosley, Sean Dion
yeah.
Hamilton. There's tons of other ones.
They just have these massive guys in the middle of the defense that just have a notorious knack for just hunting down quarterbacks. And I think that over the course of the season, they'll be able to distinguish who their best tacklers are and be able to put those guys in situational football to make good, sure tackles. Alabama, usually a sound team, when they've missed tackles last year and not created turnovers, their defense hasn't helped as much. I think, to Coach DeBoer's point, I think that could really help the offense as well.
People were expecting last year when Kalen DeBoer came in and he brought in defensive coordinator Kane Womack that this defense wasn't going to miss a step. We were going to see the Nick Saban defenses where it's just dominant day in and day out. But people forget Kane Womack brought in a totally different defensive scheme. He lost a lot of talent on defense. He had to bring in a lot of transfers, teach those new guys, dealt with injuries. On the back end of the defense, you had one returning starter being Malachi Moore. In the SEC, having one returning starter on the back end of a defense, you're going to have issues. And Alabama did have issues last year. He started a true freshman in Xavier Brown. The defensive line, that was totally shuffled. The formations were different. There's going to be issues. But going into year 2, you return so much experience. Damani Jackson comes back at DB. Xavier Brown is obviously back, only being a sophomore. You return linebacker Deontay Lawson, and then Justin Jefferson's back. You bring a Colorado transfer, Nakai Hill-Green, to help bolster that linebacker core with Jahad Campbell is now in the NFL for the Philadelphia Eagles. The big thing for Alabama last year was the rush. They didn't have Will Anderson anymore. Dallas Turner wasn't there. They didn't have that guy. Q Robinson was expected to take that next step and be that guy, but suffered an injury and was never really 100%. This year, you have a guy in Quay Russaw who Kane Womack just absolutely loves in practice, tells us that he's the freakiest person in the program. You take that as you will. But there is talent all over this defensive line now. LT Overton, he was a game wrecker last year. Tim Keenan has been listed as the second best defensive tackle in the country behind Clemson's Peter Woods. So there's talent and experience on this defense, and it's year 2 under a defense coordinator. So I would expect there to be a big step, and there wouldn't be that many games like you saw with Vanderbilt last year.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think it's unrealistic for any fan base with a new coaching scheme and a new setup to think that their teams are just going to continue to flow. I mean, people don't understand. Each scheme has like 4 different sets maybe, but those 4 different sets might have 8 or 9 different plays in each. And then you have to know where you're supposed to be. And if the running back goes here, you have to know to pick up this guy. And there's a lot that rides on those schemes. And it's not just committing to a school. You're actually committing to a scheme nowadays. And, of course, NIL has something to do with that too. Go where the money's at. But to your point, I think it'd be fair to say that this year's Alabama team, if they can block well, if they can throw well, and they can tackle well, I think they might have something kind of, not going to say dark horse because they do have enough talent on their team, but most everybody And they're taking Texas or they're taking Georgia, and for rightful reasons. Each team loaded with talent. But, Alabama, I think, can still make a push with this group if those few question marks end up being answered. Just a few injuries. James Smith, defensive line, he missed practice with a minor injury that practice game. Rotation piece, Jaden Roberts on the offensive line, not practicing due to injury. But you mentioned the depth on front for the offensive line this year. I think that's not going to do anything but help Ty Simpson. They controlled games last year when they got off to good starts, or anytime the defense got pushed early or the offense was slower out of the gate, it was difficult for them to come back into the game. How do you think Alabama gets off to good starts, especially like the first few weeks? You talk about the opener against Florida State. That's not an easy place to play. Granted, Florida State not the best looking team in some senses, but it's Doak Campbell. It's still legendary for a reason. A lot of good football players there. What do you think about Alabama's chances to start off the year well?
The way they're going to be able to start off games well is, like I talked about with Milroe and his issues last year with turnovers, is taking care of the football to start the game, but also keeping defenses honest. Don't go out there and run the ball 3 straight times. Don't go out there and throw the ball 3 straight times. Go out there and keep the defense honest where, maybe against Florida State, you come out there and you're slinging it. And then you come out against Louisiana Monroe and you're ground and pound. Yeah. Don't let defenses and teams dictate what you do, and don't come out there and dictate to the teams, well, look at this formation. That they've run this, every time they run this, they're running a stretch to the outside. Don't be that type of team. Keep the defenses honest.
Gus Mouse on.
Where if they see that formation, they're, okay, this could be a stretch. This could be an RPO. Yep. This could be a deep bomb to Ryan Williams. Just keep the defenses honest and keep the ball in your hands.
And Coach DeBoer has even alluded to, some comments, we have to be more than one-dimensional in his last year. I think that was probably his biggest takeaway, is that you got to play defense and you got to be able to run the football with your running backs. Shifting over to Auburn football, a little bit of recruiting news. They are after 5-star safety Braylon Womack. He did have a lot of offers, but he's narrowed himself down to Ohio State, Texas A&M, Florida, and Auburn. A lot of folks think that if not Ohio State, Auburn has a very good chance based on location and scheme. He is from Mississippi, but he doesn't want to go to any school in the SEC outside of Auburn or Texas A&M. I mean, you're talking about a guy that tallied 39 tackles and 8 interceptions from his safety position last year, but he also went on the offensive side of the ball and caught 54 passes for 1,045 and 13 total touchdowns. Alex, Auburn shuffling through defensive players. The secondary seems to be okay. We have a lot of good returning pieces that are still young and learning that can only get better. Especially the standout last year at defensive back. We had a lot of folks in and out of the lineup last year. Champ Anthony being back really helps us. Blew his leg. Unfortunate play against Arkansas. The hit was so bad they wouldn't even re-show it. He made a full recovery. But having a guy like Braylon Womack to just kind of float around with that athleticism, and then you can put him on offense. What would a get like that do for Auburn?
I have no doubt Auburn's going to be able to recruit and probably end up getting either this kid or someone similar to his talent level, just based on NIL and the way I've seen Hugh Freeze be able to recruit. And DJ Durkin has done an outstanding job with that defense.
Yeah, I thought it was the right point last year.
But it doesn't mean anything if your offense is as bad as it was last year. You can go recruit 5 stars all over your defense and do all this and that, but if your quarterback plays like Peyton Thorne and your offense continues to play as bad as it did last year, it means absolutely nothing.
And that is the unfortunate thing when you look at Auburn's team last year. It was like you always looked at the total yardage, and it wouldn't be that far off from the other team. And it's like, okay, so we're getting all of these yards. What's happening? And if you didn't watch the games, you didn't know. But it was almost, as an Auburn fan, like I was watching Gus Malzahn and Jeremy Johnson operate in the red zone. And what I mean by that is not so much that Peyton had no talent. I mean, he had heart. He was a decent leader, and, he did give effort. But there were times where I thought when we crossed the 30 like all the time under Gus, I would joke with my dad and just be like, oh, third down's coming, run it, and we'll kick a field goal because we're across. And it just almost seemed like with a struggling quarterback last year that we just got in that mindset of let's just take the points, you know. And I don't want Auburn to have another year like that where they can't score in the red zone. I think it all boiled down to the fact that we knew we could run the ball in the red zone, but we were scared of the fact of Peyton Thorne making tight window decisions. And I think it was just a reflection of the quarterback room. But to get back to Braylon Womack, a guy that can play both sides of the ball, we'll see how that ends up, or somebody like that. Right now, the Tigers are replacing Peyton Thorne with Jackson Arnold. Comes out of a really bad situation in Oklahoma. The offense, for all intents and purposes, struggled to find the identity in anything. So many injuries. I know when they played us, they were like 8 or 9 starters down on the offensive side of the ball, and that's what Jackson Arnold was working with. And this was a talented 5-star freshman out of high school. I think people tend to forget that because of how bad his first few games look. I mean, look, some of the throws, not good, okay? But, you know, he thrown to the wolves. You know, we hear that adage a lot, and I thought that he absolutely, Jackson Arnold, got thrown to the wolves in Norman. He comes out of that and comes to Auburn, Alex, with more weapons, a deeper wide receiver room, a more physical offensive line, I think, and a running game that is, you know, regrouping with Jarquez Hunter going to the Rams. But there's a lot of pieces there for Arnold to work with, and it's at this point where, like, if you don't perform at a halfway decent level or better, you don't have anybody to blame. Is that a fair assessment? And is it a win for Auburn to get a guy like Jackson Arnold, both of which, Auburn and Arnold, a fresh start?
I would say Jackson Arnold has everything he needs to succeed at Auburn. If he doesn't succeed, it's his fault and his fault alone, in my opinion. You have the receivers. You have Eric Singleton out of the portal. Yeah. You got Cam Coleman, who, well, he dealt with drops last season. I think a lot of that had to do with his quarterback having confidence he wasn't going to get thrown a hospital ball. You have Malcolm Simmons, who is now with the program after the Chargers got dismissed. Perry Thompson, who is a 5-star recruit. Horatio Fields from Wake Forest. So you have the receivers.
Horatio can play.
Your running back, you talked about Hunter's gone, but you still have talent there. Damari Alston, Jeremiah Cobb, the transfer from UConn, Darrell Robinson. You have talent there. Your offensive line is probably the best it's ever been at Auburn since I've been really alive.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about Mason Murphy and Xavier Chaplin, 1 and 2 in transfer portal OT rankings, to your point.
So Arnold has really no excuse not to perform for this program outside of Hugh Freeze and his coaching. That'd be the only reason or excuse Arnold could use was Hugh Freeze and the play calling, because there's already rumors and comments made about how one coach is going to handle first and second down, one handle third down. Hugh Freeze is going to have veto privileges on either of those guys. That could be a big issue for Jackson Arnold, because last year he ended up dealing with 2 different play callers, and that you could, for any quarterback, that's going to be a huge confidence issue at any level. NFL, college, high school, little league is switching from one play caller to another. You don't know what the tendencies are for that play caller to another.
Yeah, and I think to your point, this season, getting Eric Singleton, it was such a shot in the arm, I think, and I think ultimately the reason Jackson Arnold wanted to come was because, hey, I have route running finesse. Some scouts are saying Eric Singleton is the best route runner in the upcoming draft. And then you mentioned Horatio Fields, who I think might be one of the most underrated transfer portal pickups anywhere. I've seen that he is very consistent with blocking in practice, and to be a receiver that can catch and block in the SEC, coaches are going to come after you because, you know, we love running the football and setting the tone. Another thing that the Tigers did have right was another quarterback, Deuce Knight, the talented 5-star freshman, the kid from Mississippi. A lot of people close to the program would really love each to get their chance to start. There's no sign of that for Deuce for this upcoming year. However, Coach Freeze does intend on using Deuce, quote, situationally. And I think that's to what we said earlier about Ty Simpson and some of the guys behind him, Mack and Russell. I think it's kind of the same instance for Auburn in that you have Jackson Arnold doesn't have a lot of experience, but he does have some. And then Deuce Knight can come in maybe with some run packages, some non-pressure situations, especially in lesser games. How do you think Deuce gets used in his freshman campaign, if any? And if he doesn't get used, do you think that he will stick around for his sophomore year?
I would say Deuce would probably get used similar to the way Arch Manning got used last year at Texas, where Arch Manning was sprinkled in here and there to give Quinn Ewers a little bit of a break on some running packages. Now, do I think Deuce Knight's going to get a lot of running packages like Arch Manning? Probably not. Arch Manning's a better athlete when it comes to that than Deuce Knight is. But the Deuce Knight and then Ashton Daniels are both going to get their chances to prove themselves this year in practice and in games. Auburn has similar games to Alabama where it's just a kind of give me game, or it should be a gimme game for Auburn in the past couple of years.
Yeah, don't
the
say
gimme
that.
games haven't been gimme games.
No.
New Mexico State comes to mind. But the difference from this year's team from last year's team is last year, Peyton Thorne, Hugh Freeze felt like Peyton Thorne, and there was a humongous drop-off to Holden Garner, Walker White, and the other guys I had in that room. This year, I feel like if Jackson Arnold struggles, the drop-off from Arnold to a guy like Ashton Daniels or Deuce Knight is not as big.
That's a great
People
point.
forget about how Ashton Daniels, he played at Stanford, and while he struggled with turnovers, he had 20 interceptions in 2 years. Stanford has been pretty bad the past couple of years. I don't think that's indicative of how talented Ashton Daniels can be with weapons like Eric Singleton, Cam Coleman, and Damari Alston and Jeremiah Cobb in the backfield. So I don't think if Jackson Arnold struggles, Auburn's going to be that much hurt, because you have guys like Deuce Knight and Ashton Daniels behind him that can come in, and I don't see that big of a drop-off.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was a really good point that you brought up there, because I think Ashton Daniels was a product of kind of what we talked about with Arnold. Is like you look around and, what's here? And it's Stanford football, man. Nothing's been here since Christian McCaffrey left and is in the NFL now. But I think for Auburn as a fan, I would just love to see us, just engage for 4 quarters. I think last year we even moved the ball with Peyton Thorne and even scored some points in some games, but we would get off to these decent starts, 10-point lead, 14-point lead, and, we would just really, really struggle to close the game. And having a freshman quarterback in either way, basically, because Jackson Arnold, he isn't a freshman, but he didn't play much last year, so he's new to us. I think either way we go about it, there's going to be some risk there, so you may as well just, try to put Arnold in the best positions and spell him with Deuce Knight when possible. For the Tigers on defense, we talked about it earlier in the show. I thought last year the secondary was the best part of the team. We did give up a few big plays to some elite offenses, but as far as open field tackling, I have watched Auburn secondaries be about as good at open field tackling as I am a cappella singing. I watched.
Can we get a rendition from you?
No, absolutely not. I'd be scared that TV screen behind you would probably crack. But I can remember guys like Jermaine Whitehead and Jonathan Mincy, who weighed 170 pounds soaking wet to start off with. So if you're already giving up some size to these big specimens that you got to guard at receiver, you got to at least take good angles, Alex. You got to at least hit them in the right spot. And I thought last year, to your point about DJ Durkin, last year was the first time I have seen Auburn secondaries actually come up looking to hit someone. And it was really good for me to see. For an Auburn fan, when we've been good, we've had some good corners. And you mentioned the last good team we had really was Jared Stidham's year. And on defense that year, we had guys like Javaris Davis and Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis. You have a lot of guys that could play on that level of the defense. And I think adding linebackers this year, as well as some really good freshman defensive linemen, we should do fairly well. We're at the 30-minute mark of our show, actually probably a little past that. We're going to come back and have the final blitz at the buzzer, football frenzy edition. Don't miss it.